Hello, good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. It's a Tuesday morning. And how many days to Christmas? You do the math. I'm Akintobi. Good morning and welcome. Well, this morning, Dayo Akintobi joins us for the papers, and he is editor-in-chief of TCN. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to be here. Compliments of the season to you and to all our viewers.
I wish you the same as well. Well, it would seem like the most important thing as far as anybody is concerned right now is the elections. Two fronts. The Electoral Act Amendment Bill and INEC's budget. But let's start with a new telegraph this morning that is talking about 2023 election will gulp 305 billion naira, says INEC. No provision for direct primary elections, insists on indefinite suspension of Ekiti East by poll. Ekiti East by poll, as Senate passes 2022 budget today. The story is on page 3. What do you make of this?
305 billion is an astronomical amount of money, especially in light of all the other things that are crying for money in the country at the moment. Infrastructure, health, education, roads, bridges. So many things require a lot of money. And when you look at 305 billion, and it might not end at that, assuming direct primaries get accepted into law, we're talking about probably 500 billion to prosecute the 2023 elections. That's a lot of money. It gives a bit of concern because elections are just one aspect of our democracy. There's so much more that needs attention than when you consider how much money we have available for the entire plethora of services that are calling for attention. You worry that this is an astronomical amount of money.
Well, you speak as a true executive because, because the first thing a top executive is looking at what they call the bottom line.
Yes,
and
indeed.
The bottom line is always the final figure.
Yes,
but when you look at the analysis of INEC, for instance, saying that 260 line items are included in the 305 billion naira, you don't think it's something worth considering?
Well, I mean, they say their own budget is 40 billion a year. The extra appropriation is just to conduct the 2023 elections alone. They also have a number of by-elections to conduct as well. Yeah. I think 3 at the federal level, 5 at the state levels. And then they're talking about there's so many things to do before the actual election. There's PVCs to be printed. There's ballot boxes to be replaced, cubicles. There's voter registration. So in actual fact, there are quite a lot of processes. I just wish they could find a way to do it more cost effectively. So if there's leakages in places, if there's overbilling and over invoicing and things like that, we need to find ways to reduce the cost of electioneering. Now, I believe technology will play a role in reducing the cost. Maybe a one-time expenditure to get technology in place. And once we spend that money once, this idea of electronic transmission of votes, electronic voting, those kind of things, once we spend the money once, it should bring the cost down. So I think these are ways we should look at, things we should look at. And that's one of the good things about this Electoral Act, the amendment, is that electronic transmission of votes is one of the key components, although it's now being overshadowed by this furor about direct and indirect primaries.
Which is part of the other things you'll see in the second paper story we're reviewing. It's on the front page of the New Telegraph this morning, for those who may not have seen it. Electoral Act, Buhari returns bill to National Assembly, advances reasons for not signing. Electoral Acts are last opportunity to rebuild Nigeria, Bode George. National Assembly should override President's veto, Wanguma. That story is all packed on page 5 of New Telegraph this morning. What's your take on that?
As controversial as it may sound, I actually think the president got it right on this one.
Oh, really?
Yes, I do. He's given 4 reasons as to why he has withheld assent. Let's focus on one of them. This issue of the fact that it will violate the rights of parties. From where I sit, I look at political parties as private organizations. I look at them as organizations that have free association. People who subscribe to political parties join willingly and agree within themselves the rules by which they will operate their association. So I think once they have a constitution, that constitution determines, and that constitution is the prevailing law of that association. I don't think any entity has a right to fiddle with the internal dynamics of any private association. Now, anytime the courts are called in to adjudicate on a dispute of a private association, all the court does is look at the constitution of that entity and interpret its tenets. So my take is that the federal government has no business in the way political parties run themselves. I think it is an unconstitutional imposition for the federal government to make a determination through the National Assembly as to how political parties run themselves. My thing is that I believe the political parties should be free to choose how they want to order their own affairs, and that should now be the ideology by which we as people. So I would now look at one party and say, oh, direct primaries are the way you choose to order your affairs. I like that, I will join you. Indirect are the ways you want to order your own affairs. I don't like that, I won't join you. So ultimately, the power should reside with the people to choose which of the parties represent what I believe in. I don't think the government should impose the way the parties should order their affairs.
But don't forget that that law, that bill was prepared by politicians themselves who are members of political parties.
Absolutely.
But you know, you're not a lawyer.
No, I'm not. That's why I say it's my opinion.
All right, but Leadership newspaper this morning is speaking in the same vein as it will seem. Ball now in National Assembly's court after PMB's rejection of electoral bill. Find that on the front page of the Leadership newspaper this morning. Page 4 of the paper has that one and has a number of riders. President seeks amendments to direct primary clause. CSOs urge lawmakers to let the will of the people prevail. National Assembly to pass 2022 budget today. All of that packed on the front page. If I let you lose, I'm sure that we'll go on and on that one. Well, right under the nameplate, 250 billion naira Sukuk proceeds to finance construction of 71 roads that's ascribed to the federal government. It would seem like we have quite a gap in terms of the roads, the infrastructure deficits, quite a gap. And that conversation, what do you make of that one? There's 250 billion naira Sukuk proceeds to finance construction of 71 roads ascribed to the federal government.
Well, wherever we get the money from, we're still borrowing it. Whether it's a Sukuk loan, whether it's a conventional loan, we still end up taking on more and more debt. So the question we should be asking ourselves is justification of burdening ourselves with so much debt. Yes, Sukuk has its own peculiarities that make it a more attractive loan than a conventional one, but at the end of the day, it's still a loan. It's still a debt burden. And what we continue to ask ourselves is the socio-economic benefit of the infrastructure that is being built with borrowed money, and also the ability to repay the monies we borrow. Have those things pass through due process? Are they justifiable according to our current realities? Those are the things we want the federal government to assure us of, the fact that they've got this under control. They know they can repay, and they also know that the socio-economic benefits of the roads that we're borrowing money to build are going to justify the debt we're taking on.
Well, quite a lot to unpack, but the details you'll find also on the inside pages of the Leadership newspaper this morning. A number of other stories on its front page. ICPC clears ex-NIPC boss Yewande Sadiku of corruption. ASU flays FG, shifts ground on strike. That's the details to that story you'll find on page 10 of the Leadership newspaper this morning. FG fixes 6 weeks for issuance of new passports. Find that also on the front page. And guess what? Insecurity, you can do better. ACF tells PMB governors. Death toll in Kaduna attacks rises to 40. The concerns around insecurity is still quite significant. And the ACF is one of those bodies, it will seem, asking the president and the governor to do, and the governors to do more. Question then is, after all these years, what more is there to do?
There's a whole lot more to do. I mean, ACF is now saying that the president and the governors are lackadaisical and nonchalant about this thing because it's not their families that are being killed. But I have for long believed that the solution to the crisis, especially in the north, resides in the hands of northerners, and I'll tell you why. I remember a while back, the former emir of Kano said what he would like to see is conversion of mosques into schools. I think mass education in the north that is lacking is part of the major problem. And I think once they begin to address that issue of out-of-school children, this lackadaisical attitude towards education, I think if a lot more resources and political will is thrown into the educational process to begin to create a future for the children, because remember, the ready recruits for insurgency, for banditry, for terrorism are those jobless youth who are idle.
The question then is, who will take the lead on that, on what you've just talked about?
That is why I said that the ball is in the court of the northerners themselves, the Arewa Consultative Forum, all the elder statespeople, the governors, the community leaders, the traditional leaders. They're all the ones who should sit down and discuss the way forward on how to begin to invest the necessary money, the political will to begin to shift this notion of the fact that education is meaningless, and the approach in the north towards education is one as if it plays no role at all.
It may not be completely correct to say that, because quite a number of northern elders have been speaking in the same vein. So yes, doing something about it is what you say we should be playing, be taking the front burner.
Yes,
well, Markwe has a paper or two to also share with you. Good morning, Markwe.
Good morning, Ayo. It's good to see Mr. Akintobi this morning. Let's start with Daily Trust, and they have this one: 45 farmers killed, 5,000 displaced in Nasarawa. Residents flee as bandits kill traditional ruler in Kaduna. Panic as fleeing bandits chase Abuja farmers, abduct 2. ACF slams Buhari northern governors. So we're shifting the focus now to security from the Electoral Act and how much it costs to do our elections. And looks at that's what Daily Trust is focusing on this morning. What do we make of the endless spate of insecurity in the country? This story is from Nasarawa. Just on Sunday, there was a story from Kaduna where up to 40 people have lost their lives. 45 farmers now killed, 5,000 displaced in Nasarawa. What are your thoughts?
Ex-President Obasanjo said a short while ago that we need to begin to rethink our strategy and perhaps embrace a carrot and stick approach. And what I interpreted him to be saying by that is that this notion of just throwing military firepower at the insurgency seems to not be working, or seems to be working too slowly for our own good. Because at the end of the day, with each passing day, there's a new incident. Every day there's a new incident. 45 in Nasarawa yesterday, 5,000 displaced, 40 in Kaduna on Sunday. How long can we continue in this way? And yet, we have Super Tucano jets. We have 4,800 new recruits into the army in the last couple of days. This might be too little, too late. And so I spoke a few minutes ago about looking at a more long-term solution in terms of trying to ramp up policies on education in the north to begin to reorient the mindset. I think a lot of the insurgency and banditry may have started from an ideological bent, even though now it seems to have more of an economic motive. But as long as we can reorient the mindset of the ready recruits through education, I want to keep emphasizing the fact that the education facility, the education sector in the north is lacking, and there's not enough focus or funding for that enterprise, and we need to begin to look at that so that we can move these youths and these youngsters away from being able to be recruited by the insurgency. If there are no ready recruits, the insurgency will peter out. I'm not saying we should totally shelve the military incursion or the military aspect of fighting this, but I think we should complement it with a carrot. The military approach is the stick. Education should be the carrot, and I think we should begin to do that, and maybe in the long term we'll begin to see results.
There's also another big story. Omicron, Nigeria enters COVID-19 fourth wave, so this pandemic has stubbornly refused to go away, and now we have this strain. It would seem that now when we talk about COVID, the focus is now on Omicron. They have that on the front page. Nigeria enters COVID-19 fourth wave. And it looks like every time the festivities approach, you know, there's always a wave around. Last year, 2020, it was the second wave. We're just about into the second wave. Now it's December 2021, and we're in the fourth wave. I don't know, how many more waves do you think we have before we eventually get out of this? Do you think we're on our way out?
To tell at the moment, because we really don't understand the characteristics of Omicron. We're still studying it on a daily basis, and each day new information keeps coming out about the way it infects people, the way it mutates, how it reacts to vaccination and other interventions. So we don't know enough about Omicron to begin to predict about whether this disease is on the way out or whether it's even about to get worse. We really don't know. But what we do know is that Omicron is highly transmittable, and as a result, even though the symptoms seem to be milder and many of the people who actually have it don't even have symptoms at all, but because its ability to be transmitted is so virile and fluid, it makes it even more dangerous than the Delta and the Alpha variants before it. The reason is this: the more people get it, the more it will be transmitted, especially to those who are unvaccinated. There are people who are double vaccinated, and now the booster is being given. And what they're saying is those who have the 3 shots, the 2 shots plus the booster, their chances of catching a severe infection. That's not to say they won't be infected by Omicron, but they won't be killed by it, and they may not require hospitalization by it. But by the virtue of the fact that they are carrying the virus, they can transmit it very readily to those who are either unvaccinated, have only 1 dose, or have 2 doses without the booster. So it is terribly dangerous because it can relatively easily overwhelm our healthcare apparatus. Because even if all you have is a runny nose and a cold and a cough, you still need medical attention. Plus, you now are a carrier who can now infect those who have no defense at all, elderly, and those who have comorbidities or what they call underlying conditions. So this is a very delicate time, especially because it's a festive season where many people travel. Lagos State government has issued an advisory that if you don't have to travel, please don't. If you don't have an essential gathering, a public gathering, an event, please avoid it for now. That is because it's very easy for this virus to spread where people are gathered. So I would say the vaccine is available right now. It's not costing anything. If you go to the government health centers, it for now is the best defense we have against it. Let us also practice social distancing. Let us mask up. I wasn't allowed into channels this morning without my mask, despite the fact that we're sitting miles away from each other here. We still have to follow the right protocols. I think the entire country should embrace that at this moment for the overall well-being of everyone. And let's go and get those vaccinations. I know it seems to be a cruel alignment of the elements that it is during festive seasons when we actually need to hug and embrace and be close to people that this thing seems to always rear its ugly head. But let's accept that as a fact of life. We have to learn to live with this thing, and the best way to do is to defend ourselves individually by following all the security protocols.
Oh, well. Well, quite a lot to say there about Omicron, but let's look at what the Vanguard newspapers is saying, and they have this one: why Buhari won't sign Electoral Act Amendment Bill. We've said a lot on that. Says imposing direct primaries on political parties cause trouble in polity. Asks NAS to rework bill, remove direct primaries, return for assent. NAS should extricate itself from public odium by overriding Buhari. That's from Urohide. We have numbers to override Buhari's veto. That's from a senator. Electronic transmission of election results, target of veto. That is from Wike. And APC keeps mum. CSOs urge NAS to halt 2022 budget, pass electoral bill before Christmas. So quite a lot of riders, all of them having to do with the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. You find all of the details on page 5. They also have this: APC National Convention to go on as planned. That's from the CECPC. I don't know what the acronym stands for. You might want to look at page 8 to know what that is about. But look at this: foreign telcos to pay $0.045 to terminate calls to Nigeria. I do not know what this is about, but I certainly know that it has to do with, phone calls being made to Nigeria. I don't know. I'm going to spare our guest because I'm not certain if you also know about this, but there's been some controversy over how some international companies now, or is it with the collaboration of our own telcos here, to evade tax or to evade the payment of some money, make international calls appear as if they were local calls on our lines. And this might be very important, especially in this season where a lot of people have to make calls to their loved ones abroad or at home. Page 27 perhaps might give you insight into what that story is about. And let's take a look at this one. This one is extremely important. 13 die in Bauchi multiple auto crashes. It's a season where many people are going to be traveling. What will you be looking for? We've had the FRSC Corps Marshal here. We had him just last week on Friday, and he had a word or two for travelers. But from what you've seen so far, do you think that travelers are heeding to the advisory given by the FRSC?
Well, we have a very poor driving culture to begin with. We don't respect the rules of the road. And at festive seasons, like even when it's not festive seasons, we have drivers who speed too much, who are too reckless. We have drivers who drive under the influence of alcohol. And of course, because there's a whole lot more people on the road during festive seasons, the propensity for accidents ramps up in multiples. So yes, the FRSC always issues these advisories, and you find that during these kind of seasons, there's more police presence, there's more road safety presence on our expressways, but nonetheless, you still find mishaps and accidents happening. First of all, it's a function of the condition of our roads. Secondly, it's a function of the condition of our vehicles. You have the vehicle inspection service that doesn't do its job, and many of the vehicles on the roads are not roadworthy. Corruption has seeped into the system. I don't know any vehicle that is carrying a roadworthiness certificate that actually got inspected at an inspection station. You just pay the money, you get the certificate, and you're on the road, despite the fact that you're driving a death trap. So without a doubt, our people, our countrymen are exposed to a lot of risk that may not be self-inflicted. A lot of it, like I say, is third-party instigated. The roads, the vehicles, the drivers, the enforcement. None of it seems to be properly structured in a way to protect lives.
I think perhaps the question then would be: is it a problem of enforcement, or just people placing value on their lives. Very quick look at the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Electoral Act Amendment Bill, Buhari surrenders to APC governors. That's the angle of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Writes National Assembly. Explains why he declined assent to bill. Says exclusion of options for primaries undemocratic. Wow. Stories on page 2, and the details of that you can find on the inside pages, along with several other stories, very interesting ones. On the back page, Ebolu Adegboru's learned expressions, Nigeria and the legislative misfortune. Find all of that also on the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Well, that's the much of the papers we can take this morning. We have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning, Mr. Dayo Akintobi, Editor-in-Chief of TCN. Thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right, so right after now, it's time to take on the issues for the day, and you can just guess what the lead is. We'll be back.